is already
Right.
so just DNA typing. So this is the work that we've done, 154 female child cases with Dr. Madrid and Dr. Tan. So this is a calcinate swab. So we did YSCR, the male-specific DNA for NAS 154. One thing that we also tested is that Dr. Madrid recommended the use of calcinate swabs. This is just like more cartolina type, very soft for children 7 and under, because the hard swabs are very painful. So we were able to show in this paper that we are able to extract DNA from these types of swabs for 7 and under, at least to cause less pain with very young children. This is just a 39 cases that we randomly took. Sperm detection done by Dr. Madrid's team. 6 had the network. 6 had sperm detected. 21 there were none. 12 there was no data. Whether they checked or not, there was no data. In the testimonies of the victims, 18 felt they had something warm that passed. 5 said no. 16 they had no idea what was being asked. Likely the younger children. Whether they washed themselves, 28. 8 said no. So most of them had washed, and then 3 couldn't remember. And then our data shows, again, this is clear. No, there's no unknown. No. 20 of those had male DNA we found, and 19 had none. So if you compare this, 28 had already washed, but we still found 20 in those. So they did not wash very well. 18 said there were ejaculations, but 20 still had more. So I guess my line here is that Dr. Madrid, if you think that they had contact within 3 days, just collect, and we'll see what the DNA will tell us. So we've done. I talked about the mitochondrial DNA inherited from the mother, so we can do a lot. We've got a database of volunteers, not criminals, but volunteers. So we're able to do statistics, same DNA for brother, mother, sister, etc. We talked about that earlier. So that's available in our lab, and we use it for court cases. Same thing, we've got a Y database, so we look at the Y chromosome, we compare that across different, even included the negrito and non-negritos, the issues of genetic isolations of some indigenous communities that helps us evaluate those types of samples. Also were included, and we made some statistical adjustments to make this more comprehensive. So this is also published in the European Journal of Human Genetics 5 years ago. So really, we've got pushing now the question database. ProKids is pushing for question database, i.e. of unidentified children, as you've asked. We haven't had much success here in the Philippines, but that's what we're trying to see if it can be done. Our reference database, once a person or a family is looking for a child, then can their profile be already collected, samples can be collected, because there are techniques now, we can do it in the lab. You've got families looking for their children, they approach you, collect samples. Then if there are missing children, collect samples. And we can try to do them, match them on a routine basis. If we get a hit, we try to get their contact details and see if they are the ones that really.
What's the problem with the number 1? Because I remember, I think this came out of that case of that the trafficking case, baby trafficking, di ba?
Yeah.
Is this the result?
So we've got those profiles of the kids that have been given to us, but we've got only about 50.
They haven't,
Parang
so they haven't widened since.
wala pa. Pero yung mga dinadala sa amin ng DSWD, meron namang known parents. It's not missing kids. Hindi siya missing.
So hindi unidentified.
Oo. So I'm okay to talk with people about the unidentified children, particularly disaster related. But wala pa kaming database. I mean, we can put them in databases, but we have nothing to reference them. I don't think the families looking for children know that we exist.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's another.
So these are the kids that we've got. So it's just really for DNA Pro kids, we use buccal swabs, particularly back. We've got documents. We take fingerprints, we take names, we take age, we take photos. We have transport pouches. We've already taught DSWD, some of them, in fact, how to collect this. And we're okay with this. Because these are buccal swabs, we're not collecting blood. Blood kasi has to be collected by medical allied professionals, doctor, nurses, medtech. So ProKids has chosen to use buccal swabs, and therefore there is no licensed requirement for the collection of buccal swabs. We just need to train people how to do it, and that's fine by us, we can train. We've got about 90 odd kids still in the lab which we can help if you have people in the ground. Then we also draw a pedigree. This is part of the documentation. So all of this per pack, one person, one pack, and then we've got the pedigrees to try to help us document the whole case. So this is where we put the saliva, and there's a tab here. We've got a code, a barcode that will be stuck onto this once the sample is collected. So child sample collection card. It's in Spanish because of our Spanish collaborators, but we kind of know them: family name, given name, sex, etc., age, and then we've got the photo because of the issues that were raised in Guatemala. And the name of the minor, the name of the missing child, the name of the missing child. Here we've got barcodes. One thing here is that in the issues for some people are actually the tracing of the sample. So we actually have barcodes in the kits para double take on the identification of the sample cards. DNA Pro Kids globally, not us, has over 9,400 samples, 650 positive identifications, 290 negative identifications, 287 illegal adoptions of money, and 1 national law enacted cases in Guatemala. Our collaborators in Spain, actually one of their big problems according to them is the migration of Africans crossing the borders. So they're trying to address the illegal trafficking of children across Spanish borders going to Europe via boats. So ProKids future activities, we increase the number of countries involved, increase the size of our databases, international cooperation with coordination. One of the things that we've done here with Amihan is that we've had a case where another country was involved, and the child was actually here. So one strength of the network is that we can do the DNA profile here. The other parties, actually there were 3 countries. Kasi the boy was in transit. So boy was here, receiving family, in another country in Europe, and sender country in another country in Asia. So will you send all of them here? Very costly. Or will you do the analysis separately? So what we've done is samples were analyzed from sender country by our collaborating lab there, using the same kits that we've got. We analyze ours here, and then the receiving country analyzed theirs. And then all the data was submitted to us here, and we were able to do the analysis and forward the material to Amihan with no cost to the agency involved. We took the DNA test very fast, but the policymakers and the agencies took longer.
It took 5 years to bring the.
So I mean that's another problem that needs to be addressed.
But we didn't know because the boy, at first we didn't know the identity. No, he wasn't en route to Europe. But at first we thought he might be a trafficked child. That's why I took an interest in him. And then the boy didn't give us his real name for more than 3 months. So we were trying to grapple, where is this boy? Who is this boy? So anyway, finally the boy trusted the
social worker,
the nuns. Because I had to look for a nun who spoke the language of the boy. We were able to identify what ethnic group he belonged to. And then once I knew what ethnic group he belonged to, I had to look for somebody who spoke that language. So these nuns were able to establish rapport with him after 3 months, but the boy had been in custody of the SWB for 6 months already, because it was already 3 months old when I heard about the case. So within the next 6 months, we did all the DNA tests and we were able to verify the identity. But it took us another 4 years
by the agencies,
networking, etc., to get the agencies to produce the proper paperwork so that the boy could go home.
But was he sold?
No, he was actually being smuggled towards Europe to reunify with his maternal uncle and brother in Europe. He was being smuggled, not trafficked.
So we didn't know that.
But in a way, we interrupted.
The smuggling. No, but the point there is, I think the point there is we can do it fast. We can do it fast.
Yeah.
And if we streamline the paperwork involved, then if it was an actual trafficking case, then it would be so much faster.
At least we were able to the boy avoided being in the armed conflict because that was in the last stages of the civil war in Sri Lanka. So through the process,
While he was waiting
learning Filipino in the process. He's learning opo, hindi po. This is the law that was passed in Guatemala. So it's in Congreso de la República de Guatemala, and it's actually called the Alba Kenneth, because Alba Kenneth is a boy that was taken from his own home. We've heard the stories, taken from his own home and was trafficked somewhere else. He was never found. But then one requirement here is that for all children in Guatemala, I don't read Spanish, but the DNA of children must be presented before an adoption is done. Yeah. Which is your question now?
Well, actually, it's a big problem in Latin America kasi kahit historically, especially because of its history, because one of the ways they used to deal with the insurgency was to get the children of the activists. So that's why you have the abuelas de Plaza de Mayo. Yeah, then these children were given to military families to bring up. So these children grew up without knowing where they came from, and then the grandparents, because they lost their son or daughter because they were activists, they were killed, and then they lost their grandchildren. So the grandmothers are trying to find their grandchildren. So actually, I actually sat beside one young woman with her own baby. She was going back to Argentina to find her family, her real family. But she also loved the family that brought her up.
Yeah.
So she was kind of conflicted. Kasi she loved the family who brought her up, but at the same time, then she knew that she really belonged to another family.
Actually, that's one thing with DNA Pro Kids that we discussed with the Europeans. That's why they appreciated the Asian group. We were saying, because in Europe, what they were saying is that use DNA Pro Kids to reunite children to their families. And I kept on raising my hand, but sometimes uniting the children to the families may not be the best option. Because if they sell their kids, so we provided, I think the Asian group provided a different angle to the DNA Pro Kids, which actually made it more global in application. Plus, for them, their main problem was adoptions. I was saying, no, our problem here is prostitution. The families know where the kids are. In fact, the families know and get the money from the prostitution. We just have to stop them, you know. So that's why we kept on inserting new clauses for the work. And this is the last slide I've got. I'd like to invite, if any of you will be interested, I have more information. We've organized with my students at the Institute of Biology, UP Diliman, on April 7, 2015. We've got 4 international speakers talking about forensics. This is not just focused on child trafficking, but we've got them and they're great. Dr. Becky Prince was the main DNA person that identified the 9/11 victims. So she was the prime. She's coming here to talk about when tragedy forges the path to unite a nation. The second speaker, Dr. Zoran Budimlija, is now working. He used to work in New York and did the 9/11 work, also identifying the victims, etc. But he's now working at the International Commission on Missing Persons, the ones that this is the agency that now in Bosnia and Herzegovina that did the identification of the war victims, the mass graves. And so now their main push towards the end of their identification of mass graves is really to come up with international cooperations, which maybe some of you may be able to think about. Cooperation in order to help countries increase their capabilities to address issues of missing persons. Then we've got Assistant Secretary for Communication, Laila Shahani, finding order amidst chaos, the Philippines after the disaster. So she'll talk about the government blueprint, which I hope will be changed somehow, somewhere, whatever. But anyway, with the blueprint for mass disasters. And then we will talk about the molecular approach of forensic science and ethnicity in the Philippines. Ms. Sheila Estacio Dennis is Filipino, but she used to be the Assistant Director at the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in New York. She's here with me on a Fulbright Scholarship until the end of April. And she'll talk about our work on indigenous communities and setting up genetic databases to understand genetic variations in the Philippines. Then we'll talk about next-gen sequencing, data mining, really challenge samples. There are now new technologies that would allow us to use science, more sophisticated science, to get more information, to get more analysis done. And then I'll finish the day with moving forward with forensic science in the Philippines. So So if anyone is interested, that's a symposium on April 7th. Just send me an email or search for the site on the internet. My email is mariadeungria@gmail.com. I think Yan has got it, so you can get it. All right, that's it. Thank you very much for your
Thank you. Can I have one question?
Yes, ma'am. Sige po.
There's so many mothers leaving their children in the hospital, and some are given up and abandoned, and how can we, get this kind of,
Yeah, what should we be doing?
yeah,
with
there's so
those?
many children
How
leaving
can we tell our hospitals,
their
how do we deal with this? Kasi these are babies that are abandoned. Or can we ask, before the mother gives, what should we do?
photos or
Right.
whatever.
Well, you know what,
Tell them.
Okay, there are some issues here. I think I would suggest if a child is abandoned in the future, I mean, it depends on how the National Adoption Board or the International Adoption Board is dealing with it. Because in the future, and we've encountered those cases where there's a fight for the custody of a child, because for whatever reason, now, or for example, claiming children that have already been adopted overseas. I would suggest, just for the sake of if somebody is abandoned, I don't know if you want to proceed with the criminal issue of abandonment, kasi there's abandonment siya. Halimbawa, yung bata na inabandon sa loob ng basurahan. I mean, I don't know the culpability, or if the mother actually needs help. If she's psychologically, maybe the mother also
you
needs
even
help.
have to look at the possibility that the mother is also a child.
Exactly. So it makes it more complex. So what my gut feel here is store the sample, document. For us, our mantra is if nothing is written, nothing exists. So I would suggest if babies are abandoned, have a place where this missing person or abandoned babies are. Document, take photos, get a prick of the newborn screening. It's not very expensive. One kit probably is about 300, 400. I mean, we're preparing this for another client of ours for sample collection, but we can prepare that and then you just prick, collect that, and then file it. If in the future the baby, the child or the person wants to find out where she is from or he is from, then you've got that. For her. Or for example, for interagency, for intercountry.
What about getting, yung DNA could be taken from blood samples
Yes, ma'am.
of the mother, and then you have the newborn screening of the child, yung ganon. Could they match?
If they are newborn screened.
Okay, if they are left in the hospital, say for example, newly born or newly born, iba pa naman kung may sakit at iniwanan na ng basta, di ba? Yung mga ganon ba? Kasi most of the children, they are newly born and they were left there in the hospital. Di ba? Kung nanganganak ka, there's so many, di ba? I don't know,
Ang ano po kasi with the newborn screening, we have, if you rely on that for abandoned children, you have to hurdle another obstacle, which is will DOH allow us? Because the newborn screening has been allowed for a specific purpose,
Yes.
newborn screening,
Okay.
which is for children born within families. But you've got another complexity here. These are abandoned children, and in many instances, if they are not born in hospitals, they may not have
Yes,
been connected
right.
with families.
But in many instances also, for example, in Algeria, there's so many children there sometimes left by their mothers.
And what happens to the children? They're institutionalized.
Yeah, they separate, the social worker will report it and will be taken by other institutions or they're sent to the study center, and therefore no claims, di ba? And they will be processed for adoption. It takes time. It takes time.
I was just thinking, if that's the case, I am just thinking of a theoretical case. What if the child in the future is is violated? Halimbawa, nag-intercountry adoption. And then afterwards, there's violence in the adoptive parent, etc., etc. Will the issue of identity be an issue? of the
No,
child.
no, it won't be. If she will be violated, there are laws and even us, the country that we monitor kasi the children. What I'm trying to say is how do you kind of parang have information on the mother who left her children in hospital and gano'n. Kasi siyempre, di ba, nanganganak ka doon, nakita ka ng mga nurses, so somehow they have some story to tell. The mother looks like this, etc., etc., etc. And they sometimes, although they may be signing different names, ganun.
So are you asking if they can take blood samples or whatever material or article
Yeah,
that will
they
be
can-
indicative of positive for a DNA testing? Can they take this on the slide?
Yeah.
No, they can't. They can't because always genetic information is the property of the individual. So person will have to consent unless there's a law that would require it. I don't think we will have that. So it will be on the part of the abandoned child because the institution can take the legal guardianship if the child is abandoned. But the mother, but then if you see the mother there all the time, if there's an investigation, those are the things that could be.
It has to be with her consent. If she consents to it, then yes. And you have to document the consent. It should be free and prior consent, informed consent. But without that, you cannot use.
And also the court will not accept it.
Yes.
What is the difference between a thumb mark and a DNA in terms of identity?
Okay. In terms of identity, there are issues about thumb marks. Thumb marks, a lot of it, and I've seen how they do the thumb mark matching. It's really subjective, well, to a certain extent. Thumb marks, when you compare between thumb marks, you actually look at the whorls and the prints. So when I was in Australia visiting the forensic labs, they actually have a big screen and they look for patterns. And they will do the matching. It's about the same line about this. When you have DNA, it's specific DNA sequences. We can actually sequence and match it. It's not subjective. It is what it is.
So
I
there
cannot
is a
say.
bigger margin of error for
Yes, ma'am.
And also I found out that when you are 75 years old, your thumb mark is not there
Change.
anymore.
And this is also
Because
influenced.
the ridges disappear.
And also, ma'am, isa pa, is
Lord,
that sometimes
Lord, it
depends on
be-
how you also work with your
Yeah,
hands.
and how it's taken.
How you work with your hands, because some have more challenges in terms of the amount of work that they do with their hands. So if you have got, those are the challenges that
My father, for example, erase na thumb.
If an adult over 75, I think, going into the US, they don't take the thumb mark anymore
Anymore.
because it will not register. It's useless. So they will use other biometrics.
Years.
But
They
not
said that
the
years
mark.
is more.
The ears pa?
You don't know about.
it's hard because when you look at physical features, it's subjective. How big is
This
big?
one
How
is-
similar is similar?
This one is
Yeah,
really.
for sure.
It's the most powerful tool. We cannot change it. The scientists cannot make changes.
Nagamit nila yung year.
And you cannot synthesize it.
Artificial, there are ways to determine artificial synthesis of DNA. So if you're analyzing DNA that's artificial, you can find out. I mean, that's the whole area of GMO, for genetically modified organisms. You know that a vegetable is genetically modified because there are markers there. For example, antibiotic resistance that were included in the test to be able to monitor if this is GMO or not. So there are ways, and scientists know how to get
Yeah,
those.
the other question here is, for the new trends like surrogacy. Kasi there's a trend now. I think they caught it in Thailand, where there were underage girls being asked to become surrogate mothers. If you're a surrogate, what DNA does the baby have?
Okay, there are different types of surrogacy. If you are the mother impregnated by the man,
Artificial insemination or whatever.
but whatever way. But if your DNA is there, we have no way of differentiating. If the egg is yours, in whatever way it was introduced, then it will match.
But if you're just the
But if you are incubated, and we've done,
IVF.
I cannot talk about these cases, but we've done some of these cases already. where the situation is, and of course we're not lawyers, nor are we ethic people. We just have to answer the questions. But mother claims that she is mother, but definitely there are issues into whose DNA it was, and so we know that it was a surrogacy. There are surrogacy, she is the DNA source. There are surrogacy that she is not the DNA source. But it's usually the father, the man, who was a... But we've done also pregnancies where neither of the claiming parents are. So I think it's an egg and a sperm from a different source. Exactly how they got there and legal.
So,
No, this is questions kasi this is related to our Republic Act 7610. Kasi under Republic Act 7610, it's
Can minors
illegal.
be? Can minors be surrogate mothers?
No, not under our law. But under 7610, it's actually illegal to pay a woman to give birth to a baby for
It's in 76.
Dito bawal ng surrogacy.
But yes, atin bawal ang
7610.
There are some jurisdictions that allow it in the US, but not in states in the US.
Then there's this other new development, yung three-parent baby. It's the one they're
Yeah, with the
doing.
mitochondrial DNA. If there's a mitochondrial DNA defect, then one can introduce the mitochondrial DNA of another woman to address the defect of in the embryo.
Oh, for example, I heard about that. There's someone who's born with fibrocystic syndrome. So it manifests itself in the embryo. And they manipulate the embryo to remove that gene, that defective gene that expresses that defect in the child. And they will introduce another, complete
The whole genome.
whole gene. So it's not just the two parent
Yes, ma'am.
gene.
In our country, I don't think there's a law that prevents us. Well, I'm not doing it, but it doesn't prevent the performance of that type of manipulation. So at least to my knowledge, it's not easy to do that type. It will be very, very expensive. It will be very. I don't know if there are regulations in that. I mean, that's even the whole issue. If you step back, that's a big nagging question in the National Academy of Science and Technology. The issue of stem cell therapy and whether it should already be introduced in our hospitals, because there are some which have very clear medical studies and there are some which are not very clear medical studies and therefore should not be done. That's why some people go to Germany to do their stem cells, etc. And I think that will also be an area where it will be questioned.
Anyway,
I think
so,
you're tired.
yeah.
You're scientified.
Scientified.
Never mind. So I hope that there were a few learning points in terms of what you can do. The main bottom line here is we need you guys because you guys are on the ground. The extent of what we do in our lab is really the extent of what you guys do on the ground. So we're so much willing to help if we can. And then also one thing that we found even with our discussions with Amihan here is that when we think of projects to do research validations, etc., our research projects, we realize it's worthwhile when we get the feedback from you. What things you guys do are the things we try to address our research in. So we would love to keep on communicating.
So anyway, you just keep in touch because
Yes, sure.
now Child Rights Coalition Asia is working now in 8 countries. So
Yes,
let us know which countries you need partner labs. See if we can find the connections to the other countries. I just realized the time that you said you need how many cases, that was the time I stopped working.
I know! Because you were out. You went on sabbatical.
Yeah, I would like to inform everyone that we have some food. But sorry, you're in a rush.
I have to
Kita tayo.
I think this is yours.
See you soon.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.